Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Discourses of Our Time. Our discussion today is about the problems, deep-seated problems in American higher education system, to which actually many refer as the crisis rather than just problems. To address this question, today I invited Dr. Oindrila Roy, who has years of first-hand experience in American higher education. She's an associate professor of political science at Cottey College, which is the liberal arts college in Missouri. She has been teaching the social sciences at the Cottey College for past 10 years, and as I mentioned, has very rich experience in American higher education. She received her undergraduate education in India and her entire graduate education here in the United States. Dr. Roy is very passionate about the question of education and actually dedicated substantial time to the study of the science and art of pedagogy. Welcome, Dr. Roy. Thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you
me
for
today.
having me here. I am delighted to be a part of this conversation, and I'm looking forward to this because I truly care about this. Last 8 years, I have been working at Cottey College, and I have been working with undergraduates. So this is a topic which is very close to my heart.
Great. I think the most people who spend enough time in American academia know very well that our higher education system has some truly serious the problems. And the paradox is that not many people actually talk about it. Some people do, but not many people. So the purpose of this conversation is to raise awareness, so to speak, so we can discuss more about this question because we do care about it. And we will try to break down the problems, at least part of them. It's impossible to address everything within one interview and in one day, and I would say even within a month. But we'll try to address some of them step by step. The first one is the falling admission standards. So in the wake of COVID-19 pandemics and then the falling admission rates, the question which we're going to address shortly, U.S. colleges and universities gradually started to get rid of entirely standardized undergraduate tests, by which, of course, I mean SAT, CAT, and the graduate tests as well, the GRE, GMAT, and so on and so forth. So at this point, by the time when we are having this discussion, 96%, statistically 96% of US colleges and universities either do not have standardized tests as a requirement or they are optional. I'm fully aware that standardized tests always drew the criticism from the experts that they were not really assessing fairly intellectual readiness of an applicant for a college, and I do agree with many of those criticisms. However, to get rid of all of them entirely, how prudent it is, and how much does it impact the overall performance? Do you think that it is the right decision to just get rid of the standardized tests entirely? Are students intellectually ready to enter the college? How do we assess this process?
Well, I think this concern about intellectual ability goes back even further into the time when the US government introduced from the late 2000s till 2015 No Child Left Behind, and they tied federal funding to standardized tests in K through 12 education. So what students were being taught was to learn to pass a test. And that is very different from developing critical thinking skills, effective communication skills, and all of that we value in higher education. So I personally am not a big fan of SATs and ACTs and making them optional. I do not consider that to be a major source of concern. But what I have been concerned about that during that period until 2015, the students were not getting those skills that are so important for succeeding in college: writing, effective communication, oral communication, critical thinking, active reading. They were not getting those skills. And right after that became a little more relaxed, you have COVID-19. So during COVID-19, what is happening is they are taking online courses, and the quality was not always the best because we were grappling with a pandemic. We did what we could, right? Given the circumstances. So, beyond the standardized test, students do not have the skills. Most students do not have the skills to succeed in college. And that is problematic, more problematic to me than getting rid of this, of the standardized tests. Because they can still, it's in most schools, it's optional, so they can still turn it in if they want. But those tests do not really reflect the skills that are valued in college, and they are not getting those skills in high school because of these events. And of late, there is this conversation about book banning, right? So many states have been banning books in high school libraries, which are public schools. In my state, there has been, in Missouri, there have been laws, regulations that even public libraries can lose fund if they are not complying to book banning requests and keeping books. So what we want is intellectual freedom and students to be able to think on their own. So when these issues are at place at the level when they are getting their K through 12 education, they cannot be fully prepared for college. And I don't think that taking away the SAT or the ACT is going to, or putting it back, in other words, putting the SAT or ACT back is going to change that.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, what you're alluding to is that we have to go back to the high school level. In other words, we don't have to replace standardized tests with anything. We have to simply go back to the high school and teach the students some skills, the marketable skills, right? To
Yes,
assess
yes,
their intellectual readiness for the college. Okay,
yes, yes.
okay.
And these are my personal views, and everything that I say in this interview doesn't reflect the views of my employer, but this is what I have learned by working with students. I teach a course that's first year writing seminar where students are taught how to write across disciplines at a level that is appropriate for higher education, but they are struggling because they don't have the skills. Either they have been taught to tests or they have not been encouraged to read. uh, so they are struggling. So these skills are important. And yeah.
So my second question is about the grade inflation levels, which have been astonishingly inflated within the last several decades. So, for instance, the academic performance, which would earn you grade C, let's say 1970s, 1980s, can easily earn you now the grade A. So you can see, I mean, statistically, there are lots of studies about this. So
Yes, great
inflation,
inflation.
grade inflation just is astonishing across U.S. colleges and universities. I think that part of the problem here is that the vast majority of college and university departments, not all of them, obviously, but the vast majority of departments at colleges and universities no longer evaluate their own faculty. They basically argue that they don't have enough resources, the time for the faculty to evaluate their own. So they rely now on student evaluations only. Of course, there is nothing wrong with student evaluating a professor. I absolutely think that students should have the voice in evaluating the individual who teaches them. But to rely only on them, on their evaluations, kind of indirectly and maybe even directly forces the professor to raise the grade in order to get the favorable assessment from a student. So I think this has been the part of the problem. I realize that there can be many other views also regarding this question. So what is your take on this?
Well, I have been very lucky. I acknowledge grade inflation is a major problem in academia. I totally acknowledge that. However, I have been lucky to be a part of of an institution that values teaching. So when we are being evaluated, when I was on tenure track, I wasn't just evaluated on my course evaluations from students, but I had to turn in a teaching philosophy, my syllabi, my course material, and then at least once a year, a peer would evaluate my teaching. So my course evaluations were only a part of the entire assessment process, and that is what is ideal, right? You should definitely pay attention to course evaluations, but that shouldn't be the entire picture. However, for cases where that is not the case, there are ways I believe that we can work around it. Maybe we cannot eliminate it altogether, but there are ways to work around it to have a grading system which won't crush a student. But getting an A, you have to earn an A. You cannot just get an A with C-level performance. So for that, having pedagogical justifications for your assignments, right? What are the skills that you are looking at, and then developing a rubric that captures those skills, and this having that very transparency put into the process at the beginning. So in the classroom, when you give a letter, say, or an essay to write, they have the rubric and they know that you will be graded on item A, item B, item C, item D. And when you grade it, if those things don't have been addressed, you take off points. And that is, to me, a way of showing the students that this is a transparent process. And if the student comes back to negotiate that why did I get a B and not an A, then you have a solid framework to justify that this has been the case. Now, you'll say the student will still give you bad reviews, but usually when instructors are evaluated, they get to turn in a self-reflection. They can address those questions, that why the student said this. I have a reputation for having standards with my students, but I have very transparent communication with them that this is exactly what you need to do. The other part that, again, my institution is doing, we engage in reflecting on the questions, the wording of the course evaluations, right? What are they actually getting? Are they priming students to answer in a certain way? And those are the ways I think we can work on it, that I feel everybody who puts in the work should be able to pass a course, but that doesn't mean just putting in the bare minimum should give you an A. There should be standards, and as long as there is transparent communication between the instructor and the student, the students can be held accountable.
Yes. Right. Grade inflation is just one part of the problem. Another problem is that declining hours of study, which declining hours of work which students put into the course preparation. So when we compare to the 1990s and 1980s, they're substantially lower. So we have a whole range of problems, which
And as you know, that student debt is a major concern, and sometimes they have to work multiple jobs, right, to fund their education. Some of them are student athletes, some of them are in theater, some of them are in dance, and all of those which are so vital for their holistic development. So they have multiple commitments. I totally agree with that. But if there is that communication, and the teacher needs to also think of what is realistic to expect from the student given changing circumstances, and work accordingly. The other thing, which is controversial but I find useful, is giving them opportunity to revise their work, right? So you give them, say, my initial grades is, say, a C, but I give them detailed feedback, and I tell them that if you can address these issues substantively, not just turn it in by fixing the grammar and spelling, if you can address my concerns substantively, improve your argument, improve your critical analysis, improve your synthesis, then they know that I am giving them enough opportunities to improve, right? At the same time, I'm not handing out an A just for turning in the work.
okay. I'm curious about your take on credit system. our higher education system is entirely standing on a credit system. So on average, the typical U.S. student needs 150 the credits.
120 to 150, yeah.
Yeah, well, on average, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. That's a lot of the credits. So in most of the time, students are kind of almost forced to take the courses which they are not interested in, which they do not need. They're learning some abstract theories which they probably will not use anywhere else, but they have to take these courses, otherwise they cannot really graduate. So the colleges naturally and universities collect a lot of money because more credit students take, more they pay, and then naturally the income of the colleges and universities are higher. So do you think that such a high credit requirement is justifiable in the light of the fact that most, if not the most, probably 1/3 of the courses students do not need to take? It's just extra. I've heard many times this from the students. Or should we maybe replace it with more marketable skills and courses which they can actually use on the job market after they graduate? What is your take on this? Do you see this problem?
Well, I can only speak of from my experience where I am working. The credit hour requirement is around 120. And if you break that down per semester, that is 15 credit hours per semester, right? So, well, students would always complain that I don't need this, but it's only 7 years, 8 years down the line that they realize that they need it. So, for instance, when I teach quantitative research methods for IR majors, they might think that I am not going to use statistics ever in my life. Why are they requiring me to do that? And next thing you know, but this is a marketable course because when you apply for jobs, knowing Stata or R right now will put them at an advantage. So I won't just go by what the students say because there are inherent skills that they learn. For instance, taking courses in the humanities is absolutely important for them to know literature, to know history, along with music appreciation, art appreciation, to develop as an entire human being, right? The holistic development. So you can connect that one science course that they have to take so that you can develop a comprehensive perspective. Now, that said, I do believe that, at least in my major, what we do, there is enough flexibility in terms of elective courses. You have to take so many hours, but you have the freedom. You pick from a list of courses, right? So there is that freedom, and students always complain that they don't want to take hard classes, but they only realize much later that the skills that they derived from those hard classes. So to strike a balance for what the concern that you're raising, giving them options within the gen ed, telling them you have to take a humanities class. That can be a history class, that can be a literature that can be a French class, that can be a class in philosophy. So giving them options to pick what speaks to them. So a student who really loves reading can pick up a literature class, and that satisfies the humanities requirement. But I do believe in having the strong gen ed curriculum for the entire development of an individual. You cannot just develop the entire person if you just let them take courses that are quote unquote marketable, right? So you need that overall grounding. What would you think about that?
Well, I mean, we can talk about this at length, but you mentioned quantitative methodology. I agree with. I mean, quantitative methodology is very, very useful. That's not necessarily the course that I had in mind. I was thinking more about the courses like in social sphere, for instance. A lot of courses which do not really enrich student intellectually. Yes, they do have a choice. Absolutely, they do have a choice, but there is also a limited number of courses each semester that student can take, right? There are 6, 7, 8, 10 courses. So within that pool, there might not be the courses which the student is necessarily interested, but they still have to take it in order to somehow meet the credit requirements. That's what I meant. I did not mean quantitative methodologies. That's highly useful course, actually.
And I mentioned that because that's the course that students complain the most about. But yeah, that is a problem. They may not, suppose if they want to take a course in Arabic, that may not be offered in every institution. So that is a problem. But I acknowledge that that is a problem, especially at smaller institutions. However, I think to strike a middle ground, giving them as much option as possible is probably a good idea.
So conservatives very often refer to U.S. colleges and universities as indoctrination factories, indoctrination camps, arguing that U.S. higher education system completely and desperately lacks the diversity of opinion. And when you look across a lot of colleges, we really have these so-called safe spaces, right? Where students kind of shut themselves off from diverging from different opinions, from conservative viewpoints. So conservatives very often complain about so-called tyranny of the left, that very often diverging opinions, opposing opinions, which does not comply with the leftist ideology, draws aggressive reactions, sometimes coward, indirect, or sometimes even direct retaliation. How can educators respond to this? How can we address this question? What would you say?
Well, Vasily, I can only tell you what I do as an individual and I value. I think students should enjoy full intellectual freedom, right? They should feel safe regardless of which spectrum of the ideological scale you are on. They should feel free without any fear of retaliation to speak out their mind. And it is the job of the teachers to make sure to develop a classroom where that is possible, where students can speak out without being judged. However, at the same time, it is important that whatever you speak, if you are on the left or on the right, you are not disrespecting the other individual, right? So to do that, we have been trained in multiple techniques to create a classroom where the students come up with their own guidelines for interaction, right? These are the rules that we will follow. Whatever happens in class stays in class. When you are responding to someone, you first listen to understand and listen, not just to reply. Because unless you build that trust among students, they won't speak to each other. And unless they understand each other, they are not going to be able to disagree respectfully. So teaching the skills of empathy, emotional intelligence, telling them about respect, about trust, about the value of hearing each other out without judgment and making arguments that are based on evidence is very important. The Congress is oftentimes paralyzed because of polarization, right? Nobody can agree. Nobody can agree to disagree, right? There is lack of communication. And I want my conservative students, my liberal students to have the same opportunity to speak out in my classroom without feeling that they are being judged or without feeling that they have to keep quiet. But I do realize that this is not that has happened many of times in academia where conservative students have felt they have to keep quiet. But to me, that is not acceptable. As long as your liberal students, your conservative students, your independent students are not harassing others, they are not disrespecting others, they are not harming others, they should have college should open your mind, right? And you should be able to listen to others with an open mind. So that is what I live by in my classrooms.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, there have been multiple cases of violence when conservative speakers visited the university campuses, and many conservative students complain about the harassment from more left-wing liberal students. So I think it is the real problem on our campuses, on our colleges. I want to address the question of a student debt, which in 2023 reached some astronomical figures. Right now, in the United States, student loans, the number of student loans stand at 1.77 trillion US dollars. So statistically, on average, the typical American student, youngster, graduates the college with $50,000 of a student debt, which is quite a bit. That's on average. Some have way more than that, to the point that it will take them decades probably to repay it. And it impacts their personal economic life as well as their purchasing power, whether they will buy the house and start a family and so on and so forth. As an educator, what do you think what impact this ballooning student loan industry has on American higher education system per se? This is a relatively new phenomenon. This started within the last 20 years.
And that is concerning. That puts a tremendous amount of emotional stress, financial stress on our students who are starting their career with a debt. Now, what students can think about in this regard is, first of all, there is definitely value to college education. And after we talked about this podcast, I did some digging. And what I found, this study was done particularly for California, that in spite of the debt, what ends up happening is students who have a college degree end up making more money than without a college degree. If we are talking about in terms of money, they also are less likely to be unemployed. They are less likely to be threatened by things like the pandemic and when the economy is going through a recession. So those things work in their favor. And if somebody wants to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, they definitely need college education. So those things are definitely there. But then apart from the value, the qualitative value of that, but then there is the debt. What do you do with the debt? You owe so much money. You think twice before starting a family, buying a house, etc. So what I think students can do is, before starting maybe freshman year of college, of high school, start looking at different programs, different universities. And the US News report that is published, a world report by the US News, they rank every single college in terms of how much debt you would accrue on an average by attending that college. And there are wide varieties of college there, where there is very high debt, where there is low debt, where there is medium debt. So looking into that, being aware about federal loan system, how that works for students, knowing what kind of jobs you can get with your degree and how much they pay. So that is what students can do on their part, asking questions before committing to a program and just making an informed decision. But the government also needs to do something. So think about minimum wage. Minimum wage has not gone up for years. So back in the days, in fact, I was brainstorming with some of my colleagues about these questions, and one of them told me that back in the days, they could work over summer and save up towards college tuition or something. But given how minimum wage is when you are a student, that won't help, right? What you make over minimum wage. So those changes have to be made, and there have to be some intervention from the government to help these students as well.
You mentioned the power of the college and the college degree, but paradoxically, statistical evidence shows 53% of American college graduates will not find full employment which matches with their college degree and specialization. And this is kind of part of the second question. I think this fed into this distrust in college education. Actually, college admissions declined by 3.5 million since 2019. Of course, we have to factor in the COVID-19 in that, but it's not just the COVID. I think it's also general fall in the belief of the value of education, because education became very expensive and its professional value went in another direction. It declined immensely. So young people no longer see any value in getting into these massive loans and not getting a job, or getting a job which does not even pay half of what they thought the college degree would bring them.
So in that case, I totally agree with you on that, Vasily. And even if a job doesn't match their exact degree, but I'm sure the skills that they learned in college help with the job, or that could help. But again, right, the degree may not match. So that is something which is a problem, but college gives skills and access to networks and resources that the student can use. But to go back to the basics, it's firstly very important for the student to ask, what do they want to do? Right? What do they want to do? So there are jobs that do not require a college degree. So the student, I feel, given the situation, must first ask themselves, what can I do with a college degree? And then here are the pros of my college degree. And does that fit with what I want to do personally? And then all I'm saying is there are definitely these pros of college education. As an educationist, I will never downplay the importance of college. But yes, debt is a major concern. So as long as the student makes an informed decision of, this is my debt, this is the possibility of me getting a job, this is how much I can afford in terms of loans, and then committing a decision, making an informed decision. And there are resources where you can get into the data and see and talk to students when they come to campus visits, talk to the professors, talk to the enrollment counselors, ask them these questions. What do your graduates do after college? And make an informed decision. But college degree has benefits, qualitatively life-changing, and quantitatively, once a bachelor's degree, I was looking at this data from California, and it said that unemployment rate was at least 6% lower if you were a college graduate compared to if you just had high school degree. So it definitely helps. The question is whether it's worth the cost. So that the student alone can answer.
Right. I mean, definitely, there are a lot of costs. The first of all, financial. If you do not have the money, your money, or from parents, you have to take a loan, which you then have to repay with interest rate. So aside from the financial cost, there is also time investment, quite massive, the 4 years at least. And a lot of students actually opt out of all of that, and they go and learn trade, which takes 3-4 months, 6 months, 1 year, but definitely much less than a college. So they argue, there is overwhelming evidence, statistical and anecdotal evidence, that they actually, the new generation, they don't see college as skill-giving place anymore. If you ask them specifically, they probably cannot even name what exactly they learned in college.
I would counter that, but what you learn in college, which they may not realize at 2020, when they are 22 or 23, those skills, these are lifelong skills: communicating effectively, thinking critically, and logical reasoning. And those things, you can succeed on those skills. And say TikTok is very new right now, or Instagram, you are that your channel is profitable today, but there is no guarantee it will pay for you for the rest of your life, right? But having a college degree just having a BA can help. BA or BS is something that you have for life, the skills.
Well, yeah, I mean, science degrees, Bachelor of Science, it's a little different, right? It's more marketable, so to speak. All right, let's stop it here. It's very large subject. We can talk about this topic for a very long time. We, of course, did not address even the 10% of the problems which we have and generally the questions which exist in American higher education. But I hope we will continue in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roy, for joining me today. Thank you for interesting conversations. Thank you all for joining in. And please do not forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you. Bye.